Okay, there we go. Ooh, that's too loud. Okay, Mike, we got the mic on. That was a little rough. That was a rough intro. Turn the headphones down, son. Okay. As you can see behind us, the 815 day festivity or the 814 day and the 815 day weekend celebration festivities have died down some, but they still have the construction things here, which I guess means the apartment or something like that. I don't know. So we're just going to do our Rockford. We're going to keep on doing. Like I said, we're just going to do this through the whole day. This is our 815 day action or 814 day. I don't know. Anyways, all right. So we did some earlier segments where we did some talking, had some stream of consciousness, some dialogue, monologue, some critical conversations. Let's do our Rockford reading segment, which is something that we've done regularly here. Damn, it's crazy. Yeah. All right, hold on one second. Okay. Sorry. Had to blow my nose. All right. We've been reading In Defense of Looting by Vicky Osterwile. We were actually at the beginning of a new chapter, I do believe. Oh no, actually we were in the middle of a chapter. Fuck, I do not remember where we were at. That's not good. Okay, we were on chapter 5, Looted Bread, Stolen Labor. We were reading about the labor unions and the struggle that labor unions had with policing. Here, let's pick up here on page 126. And again, for anybody who maybe has never tuned in, what we do on the Rockford reading segment is we read a piece of literature, and then we cross-reference how the issues in the literature, the ideology in the literature, the tactics in the literature resonate with issues we're facing in the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in the city of Rockford, Illinois right now. We've done this for multiple other books. You can go back and find other videos in which we've done it. The book we are on right now is In Defense of Looting by Vicky Osterwile. All right, so let's continue. Looting enters the American English lexicon for the first time during the struggles of the post-Reconstruction era, when it became a more present and viable tactic of resistance to the forms of social organization and economic power of the period. The transformations of the half-century from the end of Reconstruction through the Great Depression shaped daily life in America into a form we can recognize today. The ongoing transition from a largely rural, agrarian society to a more urban, industrial one accelerated dramatically. The Jeffersonian ideal of a nation of small farm landowners and self-made men, an ideal always based in slavery, patriarchy, and colonialism, began to unravel even for the white male American citizens it was designed for. The economy, instead, was increasingly dominated by massive banks and corporations, with both economic and political power concentrated in the hands of monopolists and businessmen. The increasing numbers of European American workers then owned nothing but their labor power. The policeman on the beat emerges in force and becomes a major figure both in the formation of urban political power and in the control and repression of proletarian life in the period. Urban governance, meanwhile, changed from being dominated by more visibly corrupt political machines based in patronage, neighborhood gangs, and cash handouts to a form more centralized, bureaucratic, and structurally corrupt. This last transition had as much to do with the formation of the police as with progressive governmental reform. At the same time, an urban middle class emerged, and with it an economy based on consumerism. Consumerism here means a system in which the economy, the market, and the worker are all driven by expanding access to goods and services. We tend to think of this change as occurring in the mid-20th century, but treatises on consumerism and conspicuous consumption appear for the first time in America in the 1890s. The availability of mass-produced commodities takes off in this period. Production of those commodities was powered by exploitation of Latin America through imperialist treaty, the growth of American colonies in the Caribbean and East Asia, and an expanding base of cheap laborers within the country's borders. Massive imperial expansion mass immigration from Europe and Asia, and concerted internal migration of white settlers to the West and black people out of the South all meant growing, diverse populations of urban poor crowded into industrial centers, whose geography in this period was shaped largely by the growth of the railroads and its hubs. The increase in industrial goods in the stores in which they were sold, alongside the concentration of impoverished proletarians in city centers, meant that daily life began to feature the humiliation of wealth and luxury, the humiliation of wealth and luxury taunting poor folks from behind a pane of plate glass. Though the differences between the poor and the rich have always been an experience lived more immediately by the poor, the rise of the middle classes and the appearance of consumer goods and mass manufactured commodities gave these differences a new material content, and visibility on city streets. Looting became an immediately sensible response to this novel state of affairs. However, if the presence of these industrial goods to loot was new, looting as a tactic was already well established in its classical form, the bread riot. This kind of riot, aimed at stealing the food the people needed, lowering the price of food in the market through direct action, or forcing official distribution or policy change, is an ancient practice. Bread riots occurred repeatedly in ancient Rome. They usually worked by rioters attacking the officials who controlled food policy. During the Roman Republic, these were senators and various other wealthy elites, but later crowds jeered and harassed emperors and other imperial officials. Rather than by looting, though the houses of Roman merchants and landlords were occasionally ransacked in these movements. The bread riot was a particularly common feature of early modern Europe, but the cause of these riots is often treated as a simple correlation. Food prices go up, people get hungry, and then, quote, instinctively riot and take whatever food they need to live. Indeed, some economists explain the uprisings of 2011 as a result of a global grain price increase. As labor historian E.P. Thompson argues, this mechanical view of the masses simply responding to stimuli, this, quote, crass economic reductionism, end quote, does not bear out in the record of food rioters, self-explanation, or in the history of emergent food riots. The rate and occurrence of bread riots exploded in the early days of capitalism, which aimed to drive down the price of bread. As theorist Joshua Clover argues, this price was reduced literally to zero in the immediate case of looting, but rioters also frequently worked to control prices in other ways. They would riot to stop ships laden with grain, salt, or meat from leaving port because they understood that growing and selling for export drove the domestic price of food up. Clover calls these, quote, export riots, end quote. Rather than inchoate expressions of material necessity, bread riots were often directed political acts focused on particular villains of the market, particular modes of price gouging, or food quality adulteration. Though bread riots became less frequent as the 19th century progressed, they hardly disappeared. An oft-overlooked event in the Civil War was the rash of 24 or so food riots, largely carried out in the cities of the Confederacy, in the spring of 1863. Unable to afford the price of food, which increased exponentially both from the terrible inflation of the Confederate dollar and the massive supply problems facing both Army and civilian organization, thousands of Southern women rose up and looted the stores of Richmond, Atlanta, Salisbury, and many smaller cities and towns. Groups of men formed to watch the action, sometimes egging the women on, but rarely joining in. The looting spread from city to city, where war widows, refugees, and indigent, quote, camp followers, end quote, polite 19th century language encompassing both soldiers, wives, and children, and the sex workers who could also be hired to clean and cook for soldiers on the march, found themselves increasingly impoverished by the slave owners' war. Much as CNN would today, the Confederate press blamed the riots on outside agitators, foreigners, and career criminals, though they also have called these rioters Yankees and prostitutes, adding for extra spice that these female rioters were all ugly. Like the draft riots a few months later would be to the Union, the bread riots of 1863 were both a part and a sign of the collapse of morale on the Confederacy's home front. As industrial production shifted to occupy a more central role in the American economy, however, the bread riot receded and the industrial workplace became an increasingly central site of struggle. The goods produced there and the modes of their production and distribution became the new objects and scenes of conflict, of strike, riot, and looting. In the late 19th century, these new technologies had a particular apogee. An industry employing over 700,000 making products fundamentally central to American society, psychology, and ideology. Much as the internet does today, in the latter decades of the 19th century, quote, the railroad stood for technology and popular rhetoric, and Americans endowed technology with qualities they imagined to be uniquely American: prosperity, mobility, and democracy, end quote. The Great Unrest of 1877, which saw more than 100 people killed in combat with the police and the army, and millions of dollars of value looted and destroyed, which even briefly saw a Paris Commune-inspired council take over St. Louis, was sparked by a strike on the railroad. And I think that section that we just read through, I have, what's up? I have read through once before. So we, again, we're on chapter 5, looted bread, stolen labor. And so that first portion I had read through once before. We'll get to some of these next portions here in a second. 148, 130, that's 18 pages here. We're going to try to knock this chapter out today. But this event is over with. So I'm going to move shop, set up shop, go back to our usual spot. But before we end from being here at this spot, I want to end it with rest in power to Shannon Graves, rest in power to Faustin Guaitigo, rest in power to Little Mike Sego, rest in power to Joseph McCormick, rest in power to Eddie Patterson, rest in power to Mikey Guzman, rest in power to Logan Bell, rest in power to Kerry Blake, rest in power to Mark Barmore, rest in power to Demetrius Bennett, rest in power to Philip Johnson, rest in power to Suzette Babler, rest in power to Jasper Banks, rest in power to Jovan Fresco, rest in power to Mark Barmore, rest in power to Geno Washington. I think I hit everybody. I did that in a different order than I usually do. All right, we outside. Oh, man. Trying to reach over.